Tav Chof Aleph Amud Beis, 6 lines from the top. We learned previously about the 10 Nisim that occurred regularly in the Beis Hamikdash. In fact, the Gemara Vasulek, weren't there any more miracles? V'amar Rav Aishya, B'shah Shabana Shlema Beis Hamikdash, when Shlomo Melech built the Beis Hamikdash, Nataboy Kol Minei Megadim Shel Zahav. He planted all kinds of fruit trees of gold. V'ayim Perasem Bizmanim, and they benes, these trees of gold, produce fruit, golden fruit. Uksharuch menasheves b'hem noishim, when the wind would blow, the fruit would fall off. Shenemar yirash kalvanam piryai, it says that the fruit will rustle like that of Lebanon, like Lebanon. So it had the appearance of like real fruit. It was out of gold, and the tree was gold. As the Rambam mentions, there's an issue to plant trees. There's an issue to plant trees in the Beis Hamikdash, so it can't be that this is a real tree. These were golden trees. They had benes, golden fruit, and it rustled in the wind, and they picked the fruit. And the Kohanim sustained themselves with this golden fruit. When the Nochrim came to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, it dried up. It says the flower of Lebanon, referring to this fruit, was devastated. But in the future, the Rebbeinu Shalom will bring it back, restore it to us. And the glory of Lebanon, meaning these trees, which are the glory of Lebanon, will be given to her. So in the future, it will blossom and will rejoice, because this will be given back to us. But Al Kapanim, what do we see? We see that there was this there was this tree with golden fruit. More answer is Nisim Dekvi like a Chashiv. The Nisim that happened permanently, like these trees, it happened all the time. It was there regularly, every day. That the Tana does not count. He counts a Nisim that occurred from time to time. So, but this, even though this was a nes, but it's not in the same category as the nisim that were mentioned by the Tana. Now that we have this teretz over here, that you've arrived at this conclusion, Arna Kruvim Nami, we had the question before that Aram Kruvim, that they were b'nei soimdim. So we answered that nisim de gavai leicha chashiv, that nisim that were inside the heichal, which were not seen by everybody, is not counted, is not included. But now that we have this teretz, nisim dekviyaninu, we can answer that the reason it was not included is because they were also nisim dekviyim. It was there permanently. It wasn't there from time to time. So that's another teretz why it was not listed in the list of the Tana. So we mentioned, one of the nisim that we did mention before was that the smoke of the ocean of Aracha did not get dispersed. Even the strongest winds came, it did not disperse the winds. Amar ma va'ashen hamaracha mi hava ashen va'aracha. Was there smoke from the aracha? We were saying that was one of the nisim, that the smoke did not get dispersed from even the strongest wind. Was there smoke from the maracha? V'atanya, we learned in the Brayso, chamisha dvarim nemru be'esh al maracha. There are 5 things that were said about the fire of the maracha. Ravutza ka'ari, it crouched like a lion. So it had the appearance of a shape of a lion that was crouching down. Uvara kechama, it was clear like the sun. V'yesh ba mamish, it had mamish. It was not like our fire, which is a gas. This had a physical substance to it. And it consumed things that were dry ones, and even things that were moist as well. And it did not produce smoke. So you see that there was no smoke from the Eish of the Maracha. The more answer is Ki Ka'amrinan Behedet. There was 2 fires on the Maracha. There was a fire, the Kahanim made the fire, they brought 2 logs, Shnei Gzir Eitzim, and they ignited the fire. That was the fire that was produced by humans. But there was also that Eish Yatzim in Shamayim. The one that didn't have the smoke was the fire that was from Min Shamayim. But the fire that was produced by the Kohanim, that did have a smoke. So kikamrina behedget. When we said that it produced smoke, it was talking about the fire that was produced by the people, the common people. The sign, like we learned in the Brisa, the pasuk says, "V'nos lebnei Aaron hakayin eish al mizbeach." It says that the Kahana bnei Aaron hakayin, they put the fire on the mizbeach. Meaning, afal pi she'eish yeres min hashamayim, even though b'nei the fire came down min hashamayim, but mitzvah l'havi min hahedget. There still is a mitzvah to bring it from the hedget. The Kohanim had to light the fire as well. So this fire that the Kohanim lit, that produced the smoke. So now the Gemara is going to analyze what the Mishnah said about the fire of the Meracha. Ravutzakari, it was crouching like a lion. That was the shape of it. I learned in the Baraisa, I saw it, I witnessed it, and it had the shape of a crouched dog. Or answers like Kasha, Kam b'mikdash Rishon, Kam b'mikdash Sheni. There's a difference between the first and second Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara of a Mikdash Sheni mihavoi, in the second Beis HaMikdash, was there a fire min hashamayim at all? You're saying that the fire min hashamayim in the second Beis HaMikdash was Ravutza Kikela. Did it even have eish min hashamayim? I va'amar Shmuel bar Enyava my dechsi ve'eretz boy ve'achavda. It says that they'll build up the second Beis HaMikdash, and I will be pleased with it, and I'll be honored. Now it says v'kavda, it says chaser, it says it without a hay. So v'karin v'chavda, as if it had a hay. So ma'isha d'mechutz hay, why is it missing the hay? So that hay represents the gematria of hay of 5. Elu chamisha devarim shayu bein mikdash rishon l'mikdash sheni. These are the 5 chilukim between the two. Ve'elu hein. And these are the 5 differences between the first and second Beis HaMikdash. Aron v'chaparas ukruvim. These are all considered listed as one. The Aron, kaparas ukruvim, they were in the first Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo Melech built an underground tunnel. Yoshua Melech, realizing that the Churban was at hand, hid them in the underground tunnel, and they were not restored to the second Beis HaMikdash. So that's one. The Aron, the kaparas, the covering for the Aron and the kruvim. Eish, the fire that came down in Shamayim. So you see that this was in the first Beis HaMikdash, but not in the second Beis HaMikdash. Ushchina, V'ruach HaKodesh, V'orim V'tumim. Orim V'tumim. So Machlekes Rashi and Taisus. According to Rashi, the Orim V'tumim was not there present at all in the second Beis HaMikdash. The Orim V'tumim had the Shem Hashem. It was written on a parchment, put into the Choshen HaMishpat, and they had questions. For instance, should they go out to war or not? That was missing in the second Beis HaMikdash. Taisus learns that if that would be the case, the Kohen would be considered to be, the Kohen Gadol would be considered to be a Chusar Begonim, and he wouldn't be able to do the Avodah. Taisus says, therefore, it was there, but it did not function. Al Kolpanim, what do we see over here? That the Eish was missing from the second Beis HaMikdash. So how can we answer that the second Beis HaMikdash, had the appearance of a Kelev? Amrei, the Gemara answers, in Mahavahava. No, that's not what the Brisa means. It doesn't mean that it wasn't there. It was there. But Yomi Masechet. But it did not assist in burning the Eivorim on the Mizbeach. The Meir explains it as follows. And the first Beis HaMikdash, the fire min hashamayim consumed what was to be burned on the Mizbeach. The fire min hashamayim consumed it. The Kohanim lit the logs to be mekayim the mitzvah of v'nosim be'aron hakayin eish al mizbeach, but it was not necessary. In the second Beis HaMikdash, the fire that they lit consumed what was on the mizbeach. The eish min hashamayim did not consume it, but it was there, and it did come down min hashamayim. Tan Rabbanan, so we're talking about the fire. Tan Rabbanan sheish isha, saying there's 6 different types of fire. There's a type of fire that eats but doesn't drink. The Gemara will explain all of this momentarily. There's a type of fire that drinks but doesn't eat. So there's a fire that does both, that eats and drinks. There's a fire that consumes things like dry ones, just like moist ones, just like dry ones. There's no difference between the two. There's a fire that pushes away a fire. There's an eish that consumes an eish. Now the Gemara will explain. There's a fire that eats and does not drink. Hadidan. That's the fire that we have that we produce, the fire that's in our world. It eats, meaning it consumes dry goods and solids, but liquids, it doesn't consume liquids. So it consumes solids but not liquids. There's a fire that drinks but doesn't eat. What is that? That's the choylen, a sick person. A sick person that it makes him thirsty but not hungry. So it drinks the fire, so to speak, drinks, and it takes away the liquids. It gives him a need for liquids, but not for solids, not to eat. It eats and drinks. Delio, that is the fire of Elio and Novi when he had the Vikuach with the Nevi Baal, and the great names that showed that Hashem Elokim and Elio Novi was a Novi Hashem. He dug a trench around the Mizbeach. The fire came from Shemaim. It consumed what was on the Mizbeach. It also licked up the fire in the trench. So it did both. It licked up the water that was in the trench. So that was a fire that came from Eliyahu Navi, from the Nes of Eliyahu Navi. It consumes moist just like dry ones. There's no chilik. By Eliyahu Navi, it wasn't the same. It licked up the water, but it wasn't the same. That's the maracha. That's the fire on the maracha in the Beis Hamikdash, because it consumed whatever was on the Mizbeach, dry and moist, just the same. There's a fire that pushes away a fire, the Gabriel. That was Gabriel when the Nes to save Hanan, Mishal, Vazariah, to save them when they were thrown into the furnace. Nebuchadnezzar had them thrown into the furnace. He cooled off the furnace for them, and he pushed it away, the fire over there. He is Eish, he's a Malach, which is an Eish, and he pushed away the fire, and he cooled it off for them. He burned the people from Bavel, the Babylonians, who threw them into the furnace. So that's the Gabriel. Yesh Eish Eichelos Eish. There's a Eish that consumes fire. By Gabriel, it pushed away the fire, but it's an Eish that consumes the fire. That's the Shechina. That's the Eish of the Shechina, and the Amar Mar Haishin Etzba Beinei Usrafen. That those who said, the Malachim that said that he should not create mankind, he, so to speak, he extended his finger and consumed them. So that was the Eish that consumed, the Eish of the Shechina that consumed the fire of the Malachim. And said, V'ashan HaMaracha, so one of the Nisim were that the Ashan HaMaracha feel kol haruchis sheba'olam ein mezizos oisam mimekayma. These are the strongest winds. They don't push the fire. They don't put the smoke of the fire. They don't push it away. They don't dispel it or disperse it. They don't cause it to budge from its place. Frank the Gemara, is that so? On after Sukkot, on Motzei Yontav Achron Shel Chag. So the Machlekes doesn't mean after Shmini Atzeres, or does it mean at the end of Hoshana Rabbah. So we see that the actual Gemar Din, as we'll see momentarily, comes by the end of Sukkot, after Sukkot. So after Sukkot, Hakol Seifin La'ashan HaMarach. Everyone would look to see the column of smoke from Maracha to see which way it would be tilting. So everyone looks at the Ashan HaMaracha Naita Klapit Zofen if it drifted towards the north, meaning if it's drifting towards the north, that means there's a south wind that's pushing it towards the north. That means there's a south wind. Then, if there's a south wind, Anim Smeichem Ubalabatim Matzevim, the poor people will be happy, and the wealthy people would be sad. Why is that? Because that indicates that there'll be an abundance of rain, there'll be a lot of crops, but the wealthy people won't be able to keep it for a long time in the storehouses, so they'll have to release it to the market, and the prices will go down. So the poor people will be happy, they'll be able to buy the produce at a lower price. The wealthy people would be unhappy because they would not get a high price for the produce. Not a klape doram, but if it drifted towards the south, that means there was a north wind. Then in that case, Aniyim atzevim, the aniyim would be sad, ubalabatim smechem, and the balabatim, the wealthy people, would be happy. Why is that? There would not be an abundance of rain. Upereseim mishtamrim. So there wouldn't be an abundance of rain. There'll be a crop, but it wouldn't be a drought. There would be a crop, but they would not have to release it to the market. They would be able to store it in the storehouses because an abundance of rain causes the fruit, the produce in the storehouses to rot. There wouldn't be an overabundance of rain. It would be able to be preserved in the storehouses without rotting. They would not have to release it to the market, and therefore the prices would be high. They'd be able to get a high price for it, so the balabatim would be happy, but the Nim would be sad. Not the Klapi Mizrach, if it tilted, it drifted to the east, that means there's a westerly wind. Hakol Smechem, everybody would be happy with that, because there is a right amount of rain, and there's an abundant crop. The crops in the storehouses would not get ruined, they would not get spoiled. So therefore, there would be a proper amount of produce on the market. The balabatim would be able to store produce in the storehouses. They'd have an inventory for the future. There would be enough to be on the market because there would be a healthy crop. So there'd be enough on the market. The prices would be stable, wouldn't be too high. The Aniyim would be happy with that. The balabatim would be happy that even though they weren't getting the highest prices, but they were a stable price, and they would have in their storehouses, they were able to preserve and store the produce for the future. Klape Marav, if it drifted towards the west, that means there's an easterly wind. Everybody would be sad because the winds would be hot and dry. There'd be a drought, and there wouldn't be a sufficient produce for people to go around for the population. So, what do we see over here? That we see that the column of smoke did drift. We were saying before that there was a nisim that it did not get dispersed even though there's the strongest winds. We see that it tilted to the east, to the west, to the north, and the south. Gemara answers, it didn't get dispersed. It was like swayed like a palm tree back and forth. But it did not get dispersed. That's what it means. It tilted, but it didn't get dispersed. It says that if it drifted to the east, meaning there'd be a westerly wind, everyone would be happy. But to the west, everyone would be sad. I'll ask you a stira. It says a wind from the east is always good. And a wind from the west is always hard, is always bad. Ruch Tzfainis, if it's a northerly wind, it's good for the wheat if it's a third grown. But it's bad for the olives when they're just blossoming, because the wind from the north the rains are not in abundance. Now, if the wheat is already grown a third or more, it doesn't need that much rain, so therefore it's good for it. But for the zaysim who are blossoming, the olives that are blossoming, it needs an abundance of rain, and therefore it's missing. Ruach droimes kasha lachitim b'shashav shlish. The south wind is harmful for the wheat when it's a third grown. V'yafel zaysim is machim chaytim. But it's good for the zaysim when they're blossoming, because this rain is an abundance of rain. If the wheat is already a third grown, too much rain spoils it. But the olives, which are blossoming, need an abundance of rain. What's a siman? The shulchan which had the lechem upon, which is from wheat, that's in the north. So the north wind is good for the wheat. The menorah is in the south, and the menorah has from the oil from olives that's in the south. So the south wind is good for the olives. Each one, it cultivates its own. So the menorah is in the south, and the south wind is good for the olives. The shulchan is in the north wind is good for the chitim. So Akopanim, we see that it's a stira. The Gemara says like kasha halon v'halahu. There's a difference between Bavel and Eretz Yisrael, meaning Bavel is a region where it's a very wet region. So therefore, over there, they do not need a lot of rain, and a lot of rain is harmful for it. So it's harmful for it. So therefore, we say that over there, it's just the opposite. In Eretz Yisrael, which has dry conditions, therefore it needs more of the rain. But in Bavel, it's wet conditions, and it doesn't need the rain. Therefore, the westerly wind has an abundance of rain, and the easterly wind has where it's not that much rain. In Bavel, where it's a moist condition, therefore we say that the abundance of rain, where it is, that's harmful for it. And the easterly winds, so the westerly winds is harmful, which is an abundance of rain. The easterly is where it's not an abundance, is good. In Eretz Yisrael, it's just the opposite. Hadrolach Shivas Yom, Hadrolach Shivas Yom, Hadrolach Shivas Yomim. V'Rishayna Kol Mi Sheroitz Litrum Tzbeach Tayrem.